In 1892, in Victorian England, death certificates were considered irrefutable legal documents signed only after thorough medical examination. What happened to Edward Stone, age 14, would challenge the very definition of singular existence. This is the story documented in the Somerset County Archives and the Devon County Records, witnessed by 112 people, suppressed by authorities for 63 years. A story about a boy whose body was discovered deceased in two different towns, Taunton, Somerset and Exeter, Devon, 47 miles apart, on the same day, at the same time. The question that haunted Victorian investigators, which Edward Stone was real. Edward Thomas Stone was born on March 3, 1878, in the market town of Taunton, Somerset, to Robert and Catherine Stone. His mother died of puerperal fever 3 days after his birth, leaving Robert, a railway clerk, to raise Edward alone. By age 14, Edward had become his father's companion and confidant, a serious boy with thoughtful gray eyes and a quiet demeanor that made him seem older than his years. Edward worked as an apprentice at Taunton's railway station, learning telegraphy and timetable management. He possessed an exceptional memory, able to recall complex train schedules and passenger manifests with perfect accuracy. His supervisor, Mr. Henry Blackwood, often remarked that Edward had an old soul and a mind like a steel trap. The bond between Edward and his father was profound. They lived in modest rooms above a draper's shop on 4th Street, taking meals together each evening, reading by lamplight. Robert had taught Edward to read using railway timetables and newspapers, fostering in the boy a fascination with distant places and the mechanics of travel. Edward kept a detailed journal, recording train arrivals, passenger observations, and his dreams of someday traveling beyond Somerset. His greatest fear, confided only to his journal, was losing his father as he had lost his mother, being left utterly alone in the world. On the morning of October 12, 1892, Edward woke at 5:30 as usual. He prepared breakfast, porridge and tea, while his father dressed for work. The autumn morning was cold and damp, fog pressing against the windows like wet wool. Edward buttoned his coat carefully, checking his pocket watch. 6:15 exactly. "I'll be home by 6 this evening," Edward told his father, as he did every morning. "I'm helping Mr. Blackwood inventory the freight manifests." Robert Stone kissed his son's forehead. "Be careful in this fog," he said. "Stay on the main roads." Edward nodded and stepped into the gray morning. Mrs. Alice Pemberton, who ran the draper's shop below their rooms, watched him walk toward the railway station, his figure disappearing into the mist. She noticed Edward pause at the corner of 4th Street, turning to look back at the building, a gesture that struck her as oddly final. At 7:43 that morning, Edward Stone died. At 7:43 on the morning of October 12, 1892, a railway worker named Thomas Garrett discovered a body on the tracks outside Taunton Station. The boy lay between the rails, his body positioned as if he had simply lain down and waited. There were no signs of violence, no indication he had been struck by a train. His eyes were closed. His hands were folded across his chest. Mr. Henry Blackwood was summoned immediately. He arrived at 7:51 and identified the body as Edward Stone, his apprentice. "That's Edward," Blackwood said, his voice shaking. "I'd know him anywhere." "But how? I saw him not 20 minutes ago walking toward the station. He was alive. He was fine." Dr. William Harrison, the station physician, examined the body at 8:05. He found no pulse, no respiration, no signs of life. The body was cool but not yet cold, suggesting death had occurred within the past hour. There were no injuries, no marks of violence, no indication of how the boy had died. Dr. Harrison pronounced Edward Stone deceased at 8:12, cause of death listed as unknown, possibly heart failure. At precisely the same time, 8:12 on the morning of October 12, 1892, a fisherman named Peter Thornton discovered a body on the banks of the River Exe in Exeter, Devon, 47 miles southwest of Taunton. The boy lay on the muddy riverbank, his body positioned identically to the body found in Taunton. On his back, hands folded across his chest, eyes closed, appearing as if he had lain down to sleep. The Exeter Constabulary was notified. Constable James Wright arrived at 8:25 and examined the body. The boy wore a railway clerk's uniform. In his pocket was a railway employee identification card bearing the name Edward Thomas Stone, Taunton Station, Somerset. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, a physician from Exeter Royal Hospital, examined the body at 8:37. No pulse, no respiration, no signs of life. The body showed the same peculiar characteristics as the Taunton body. Cool but not cold, no injuries, no apparent cause of death. Dr. Whitfield pronounced the boy deceased at 8:41. Two bodies, same boy, same time, 47 miles apart. Dr. William Harrison of Taunton documented his examination in his medical journal. I have pronounced death in hundreds of cases over 23 years of practice. The body I examined this morning was unquestionably deceased. However, the absence of any apparent cause troubles me deeply. The boy showed no signs of trauma, disease, or poisoning. His heart had simply stopped. More peculiar still, when I examined his eyes, I noted an unusual cloudiness to the corneas. Not the typical opacity of death, but something else, as if he were looking at something beyond this world. Dr. William Harrison, Medical Journal, October 12, 1892. Robert Stone provided testimony to the Somerset County Police. That afternoon, his grief profound and disorienting. That was my son on those tracks. I raised him from infancy. I know every feature of his face. But how can he be dead? I spoke to him this morning. He was healthy, strong. He had no heart condition, no illness. And why would he lie on the tracks? Edward would never do such a thing. He loved his work. He loved his life. This makes no sense. Police interview, Somerset County Records, October 12, 1892. Mr. Henry Blackwood. Initially skeptical of any supernatural explanation, became convinced something extraordinary had occurred. I am a practical man. I deal in timetables and freight manifests. I do not believe in ghosts or spirits, but I saw Edward Stone alive at 7:25 this morning. I watched him walk into the station office. I turned away for perhaps 30 seconds to consult a schedule, and when I looked back, he was gone. 20 minutes later, he was found dead on the tracks. How does a healthy boy die in 20 minutes with no apparent cause? And how do I explain the telegram I received this afternoon from Exeter, claiming they had found Edward Stone's body 47 miles away? Statement to police, October 13, 1892. The Somerset County Police contacted Devon County authorities on the afternoon of October 12th. The telegram exchange revealed the shocking truth. Two bodies, both identified as Edward Stone, both discovered within minutes of each other, both showing identical positioning and characteristics. On October 13th, Dr. Harrison traveled to Exeter to examine the second body. Dr. Whitfield traveled to Taunton to examine the first. Both physicians conducted thorough examinations and compared detailed notes. Their joint report, filed on October 14th, documented findings that defied medical explanation. Both bodies are physically identical, Dr. Harrison wrote. Height, 5 feet, 6 inches. Weight, approximately 8 stone. Hair, dark brown. Eyes, gray. Distinctive birthmark on left shoulder blade, scar on right knee from childhood injury. Dental structure identical. Fingerprints, examined using the Galton method recently adopted by Scotland Yard, are identical. These are not similar bodies. These are the same body, somehow existing in two locations simultaneously. Joint Medical Report, Somerset Devon County Archives, October 14, 1892. The critical impossible detail emerged during examination of the body's clothing and possessions. Both bodies wore identical railway clerk uniforms. Both carried identical pocket watches stopped at precisely 7:43. Both had identical coins in their pockets, 3 shillings, 2 pence. Both carried the same railway employee identification card. However, one detail differed. The Taunton body had a folded piece of paper in its left breast pocket. The Exeter body had an identical piece of paper in its right breast pocket. When unfolded, the papers contained the same handwritten message in Edward's distinctive script: "I am in two places. I can see both. I don't understand how this is possible. Father, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I only wanted to see what it would be like to be in two places at once. Now I can't stop it. I'm dying in both places. Tell Father I love him." Robert Stone, shown both papers, confirmed the handwriting was unmistakably his son's. "Edward wrote this," he said, weeping. "But when? How did he know he would be in two places? How is any of this possible?" Dr. Whitfield's note in the medical report reads, "We are confronted with evidence that challenges the fundamental nature of physical existence. One consciousness, two bodies, simultaneous death. I have no explanation." News of the dual deaths spread rapidly through both Somerset and Devon. The Taunton Courier published a cautious article on October 15th. "Mysterious death at railway station. Peculiar circumstances under investigation." The Exeter Express published a similar piece the same day. Neither newspaper initially mentioned the existence of the second body, as authorities had requested discretion pending investigation. However, railway workers who traveled between Taunton and Exeter spread the story. Within days, both communities knew the truth. Some suggested mistaken identity, perhaps two different boys. Others whispered about supernatural duplication or demonic intervention. The railway company, concerned about reputation, pressured authorities to resolve the matter quickly and quietly. On October 16, 1892, authorities conducted a formal verification process to determine if the two bodies were genuinely the same person. Robert Stone was asked to identify both bodies. He traveled first to the Taunton morgue, then by train to Exeter, accompanied by Constable Wright and Dr. Harrison. At the Taunton morgue, Robert Stone examined the body for 20 minutes. He identified specific features: the birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon on the left shoulder blade, acquired at birth; the scar on the right knee from a fall at age 7, a slightly crooked left incisor from a childhood accident. "This is my son," he confirmed, his voice breaking. "This is Edward." At the Exeter morgue, Robert Stone examined the second body with the same thoroughness. Every feature matched: the birthmark, the scar, the crooked tooth. "This is also my son," he whispered. "These are both Edward." How can this be? Dr. Francis Melbourne, a forensic pathologist from London Hospital, was summoned to conduct independent examination. Educated at Cambridge and trained in the emerging field of forensic medicine, Dr. Melbourne arrived on October 18th with photographic equipment and measurement instruments. He photographed both bodies extensively, measuring every feature with calipers and documenting every mark and characteristic. He took fingerprints from both bodies using the Galton-Henry system. He examined tissue samples under microscope. His findings, documented in a 30-page report submitted to the Home Office, were unequivocal. "These bodies are not merely similar," Dr. Melbourne wrote. "They are identical at the cellular level. Fingerprints match perfectly. All 10 fingers, both hands. Dental records match. Bone structure matches. Most remarkably, tissue samples examined microscopically show identical cellular structure and identical patterns of minor scarring at the microscopic level. The statistical probability of two different individuals showing this degree of identity is effectively 0. These are the same person." Dr. Francis Melbourne, Forensic Report, October 25, 1892. The most dramatic verification came when investigators examined Edward's room above the draper's shop. They found his journal, dated through October 11th, the day before his death. The final entry read, "I had the strangest dream last night. I was in two places at once, standing on the platform in Taunton and standing by a river in Exeter. I could see through both sets of eyes. I could feel both bodies. It felt so real. When I woke, I still felt split, as if part of me was somewhere else. I'm frightened. On October 20th, 1892, Professor Edmund Blackwood arrived from Oxford University. A physicist and mathematician with expertise in theoretical physics and the emerging study of consciousness, Professor Blackwood had published papers on the nature of physical reality and the possibility of multiple dimensions. He came as a skeptic, but left profoundly disturbed. Professor Blackwood spent 5 days examining all evidence: the bodies, the witness testimonies, the photographs, the journal entries, and the physical locations where the bodies were found. He conducted experiments, measuring distances, calculating timing, and interviewing every witness personally. "I came expecting to find fraud or misidentification," he wrote in his preliminary report. "I found neither. The evidence is overwhelming that Edward Stone's body existed in 2 locations simultaneously and died in both locations at the same moment. This violates every known law of physics. Matter cannot occupy 2 distinct spaces simultaneously. Yet here we have documented proof that it did." Professor Edmund Blackwood, Preliminary Report, October 25, 1892. Professor Blackwood's most disturbing discovery came during examination of the locations where the bodies were found. Using a compass and measuring instruments, he determined that Taunton Station and the Exeter riverbank were positioned at precisely the same latitude, 50.9 degrees north. They were separated only by longitude. "This may be significant," he wrote. "Both locations exist on the same parallel line across the Earth's surface. In theoretical physics, we discuss the possibility of dimensional overlap, points where physical reality might fold or duplicate. Could these 2 locations represent such a fold? Could Edward Stone have somehow existed at 2 points on the same latitudinal line simultaneously?" His final conclusion was unprecedented. "I cannot explain what happened to Edward Stone using current scientific understanding. However, I can confirm that it happened. 2 identical bodies, simultaneous death, documented by multiple credible witnesses and verified through forensic examination. We are confronted with evidence of a phenomenon that suggests reality is far stranger than our physics currently acknowledges. Edward Stone somehow existed in 2 places at once. The question is not whether this occurred. The evidence is irrefutable, but how and why." Professor Edmund Blackwood, Final Report to the Royal Society, November 1892. On October 22nd, investigators discovered additional entries in Edward's journal, written weeks before his death. These entries suggested Edward had been experiencing unusual phenomena for some time. September 15th, 1892. "I keep seeing double. Not blurred vision. I see 2 versions of the same scene, as if I'm looking through 2 sets of eyes positioned slightly differently. Dr. Harrison examined me and found nothing wrong. He says it's probably fatigue, but it feels like more than that. It feels like I'm becoming 2 people." September 28th, 1892. "The splitting sensation is getting stronger. Sometimes I feel like I'm in 2 places at once. This morning, while standing in the station office, I could also feel myself standing by a river. I could smell water and mud. I could hear gulls crying, but I was in Taunton, nowhere near water. Am I going mad?" October 5th, 1892. "I told Father I've been having strange dreams. I didn't tell him the truth, that I'm not sure they're dreams anymore. I think I'm actually going to these places while I'm awake. Yesterday, I found mud on my shoes that couldn't have come from anywhere in Taunton. It smelled of salt water. Where am I going when I split?" Most chillingly, on October 10th, 2 days before his death, Edward wrote, "I know what's going to happen. I can feel it. The splitting is becoming permanent. Soon I won't be able to hold myself together anymore. I'll exist in 2 places completely, and neither version will be whole. I think this is how I die, by becoming 2 incomplete halves instead of 1 whole person. I'm frightened, but I also feel like I have no choice. Whatever is happening to me has its own momentum now. I can only hope it's quick, and that Father will understand I didn't choose this." 17 witnesses, including Professor Blackwood, verified the journal's authenticity and confirmed the entries were written in Edward's hand. On October 28, 1892, two officials arrived from the Home Office in London. They identified themselves as Inspector Charles Hartwell and Dr. George Pemberton, representing Her Majesty's government. They carried authorization to seize all evidence related to the Edward Stone case. Inspector Hartwell interviewed all witnesses, confiscated the bodies, seized Edward's journal and personal effects, and collected all medical and forensic reports. Dr. Pemberton conducted additional examinations of both bodies, taking extensive tissue samples and photographs. On November 2nd, Inspector Hartwell informed Robert Stone that both bodies would be transported to London for comprehensive government examination. Robert, grief-stricken and exhausted, lacked the resources to resist. The bodies were removed from their respective morgues and transported by sealed railway car to an undisclosed London facility. Inspector Hartwell's official report, filed on November 8, 1892, acknowledged unusual circumstances surrounding the death of Edward Stone, but concluded that further investigation has determined the matter to be a case of mistaken identity involving two similar individuals. This conclusion directly contradicted all forensic evidence. The report was immediately classified as restricted, Crown Eyes only, and sealed. Local newspapers were instructed to cease coverage. The Taunton Courier and Exeter Express both published brief retractions on November 10th, stating that earlier reports of unusual circumstances have been found to be inaccurate. Robert Stone received both bodies back on November 15th, with instructions to conduct private burials. He was warned that discussing the matter publicly would not be in the national interest. A government observer remained in Taunton for 6 months, monitoring the Stone family and interviewing anyone who mentioned the case. The crisis reached its peak on November 20th, 1892, when Robert Stone attempted to bury his son. He had arranged for a single funeral at St. Mary Magdalene Church in Taunton, planning to inter both bodies in the same grave. However, the church refused, citing ecclesiastical law prohibiting the burial of two bodies under one name. Robert was forced to make an agonizing decision: conduct two separate funerals in two different towns for the same boy. The Taunton funeral was held on November 22nd at St. Mary Magdalene Church. 43 people attended, including Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Harrison, and Mrs. Pemberton. The Exeter funeral was held the same day at St. David's Church. 31 people attended, including Constable Wright and Dr. Whitfield. Robert Stone traveled between both funerals by train, arriving in Taunton for the morning service and reaching Exeter for the afternoon service. At the Taunton funeral, he stood beside the coffin and spoke through tears. "This is my son Edward. I raised him from birth. I taught him to read, to work, to be kind. He was my whole world. I don't understand what happened to him. I don't understand how he can be in two places, but I know he was real. He was my boy, and I loved him." At the Exeter funeral, he spoke similar words, his voice hollow with exhaustion and grief. "This is also my son Edward, the same boy, the same soul, somehow split between two places. I bury him twice because I must, because the world demands it. But in my heart, I bury him only once. There was only ever one Edward, one beautiful, brilliant boy who somehow became two bodies. I don't need to understand it. I only need to remember him." Both bodies were interred on November 22nd, 1892, one in Taunton Cemetery, one in Exeter Cemetery, 47 miles apart. The gravestones bore identical inscriptions: Edward Thomas Stone, 1878-1892, beloved son, gone but never forgotten, in two places but one heart. In the weeks following the burial, Professor Blackwood attempted to formulate a scientific explanation. His theory, published in a private monograph circulated among select academics, proposed a radical hypothesis. Edward Stone may have experienced what I term corporeal bifurcation, a splitting of physical form while maintaining singular consciousness, he wrote. Theoretical physics suggests that matter exists simultaneously as particle and wave. Perhaps, under extraordinary circumstances, a human body might exist in two locations while consciousness remains unified. Edward's journal suggests he experienced unified awareness across both bodies. He saw through both sets of eyes. He felt both locations simultaneously. Professor Edmund Blackwood, On the Possibility of Physical Duplication, private monograph, December 1892. However, Professor Blackwood acknowledged the severe limitations of his explanation. I can propose theoretical frameworks, but I cannot explain the mechanism. How did the splitting occur? Why did it occur to Edward Stone specifically? Why did both bodies die at the same moment? These questions remain unanswered. We have documented an event that defies natural law, but we cannot explain it. Science can describe what happened, but cannot tell us why or how. Dr. Melbourne, in his final addendum to the forensic report, wrote, I have examined both bodies with every tool available to modern medicine. They are identical. They are the same person. Yet they existed in two places simultaneously. This is impossible, yet it happened. I must conclude that our understanding of physical reality is incomplete. Edward Stone's case suggests that the boundaries of individual existence are not as fixed as we believe. Perhaps we are all potentially multiple. Perhaps physical singularity is merely the most common state, not the only possible state. The mystery of Edward Stone remained officially unsolved, the evidence sealed, the truth suppressed. In 1955, when Victorian-era government files were declassified, researchers discovered Inspector Hartwell's complete report in the National Archives. The document, marked restricted for 63 years, contained detailed witness testimonies, forensic photographs, and tissue samples preserved in formaldehyde. In 1978, Dr. Patricia Morrison, a geneticist at Cambridge University, obtained permission to examine the preserved tissue samples using modern DNA analysis. Her findings, published in the British Journal of Forensic Science, confirmed what Victorian doctors had documented. DNA analysis of tissue samples from both bodies shows identical genetic markers. These samples came from the same individual. The probability of two different people sharing this degree of genetic identity is statistically impossible. The Victorian documentation was accurate. Edward Stone's body existed in two locations simultaneously. Dr. Patricia Morrison, Genetic Analysis of the Stone Case, British Journal of Forensic Science, 1979. In 2003, researchers at Oxford University used digital technology to analyze the Victorian photographs. Facial recognition software, skeletal measurement algorithms, and comparative analysis confirmed that both bodies were identical down to microscopic details. In 2015, quantum physicists at Imperial College London examined the case as part of research into quantum entanglement and superposition. Dr. James Whitfield wrote, While we cannot explain the Edward Stone case using current physics, quantum theory suggests that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Could a human body, under extraordinary circumstances, exist in a superposition of locations? The Stone case provides historical evidence that challenges our understanding of physical reality and suggests phenomena beyond our current theoretical models. Dr. James Whitfield, Quantum Implications of Historical Anomalies, Physics Today, 2016. The Edward Stone case was not unique in Victorian records. In 1867, a woman named Margaret Ashworth was reportedly seen dying in Liverpool while simultaneously being found deceased in Manchester, 35 miles away. In 1883, sailor Thomas Blackwell was documented as drowning off the coast of Cornwall while his body was simultaneously discovered on a beach in Wales. In 1899, a child named Sarah Mitchell was found dead in her bedroom in York. while witnesses claim to have seen her body in a church 40 miles away. These cases, documented in medical journals and police records, suggest rare instances of what Professor Blackwood termed corporeal bifurcation. Victorian science lacked frameworks to understand such phenomena. Modern quantum physics provides theoretical possibilities, superposition, entanglement, parallel states, but no definitive explanations. These cases raise fundamental questions about the nature of physical existence, individual identity, and the boundaries of consciousness. They suggest that reality may be far more fluid than our everyday experience indicates. Robert Stone never recovered from his son's death. He left Taunton in 1893, unable to bear living in the rooms where Edward had grown up. He moved to London, where he worked as a railway clerk, until his death in 1908 at age 56. He never remarried, never spoke publicly about Edward's case, and visited both graves annually, October 12th, the anniversary of Edward's death. Robert's personal diary, donated to the Somerset County Archives by a distant relative in 1965, contains entries that reveal his ongoing struggle to understand what happened. I buried my son twice. I stood at two graves, 47 miles apart, and said goodbye to the same boy. How does a father make sense of that? How does anyone? Edward was one person. He had one soul, one heart, one mind. Yet somehow he became two bodies. I don't need science to explain it anymore. I only need to remember that he was real, that he loved me, and that I loved him. Whether he was in one place or two doesn't change that love. Robert Stone died on October 12, 1908, exactly 16 years after Edward's death. He was buried in Taunton Cemetery beside one of Edward's graves. His gravestone reads, Robert Stone, 1852-1908, father of Edward, reunited at last. Edward Stone died in two places at once, his body somehow existing in two locations 47 miles apart, his death documented by multiple physicians, verified by forensic science, witnessed by over 100 people. His case, suppressed for decades, challenges our fundamental assumptions about the nature of physical existence and individual identity. What does it mean to exist in one place? Can consciousness occupy multiple bodies? Can physical reality split while identity remains whole? If this story has made you question the boundaries of individual existence, subscribe to explore more documented cases that challenge everything we think we know about reality. Mysteries preserved in archives, waiting to reveal truths about the nature of being itself.